Something strange happens when science walks into the room. People who claim to have absolute truth suddenly look nervous. Their confidence cracks. Their tone shifts. Their certainty trembles. And here's the part nobody wants to admit. Religious people don't fear science because it's complicated. They fear it because it's simple. Because simple explanations destroy sacred ones. Quietly, relentlessly, one question at a time. But the real reason runs even deeper. It's not that science threatens their beliefs. It threatens the psychology that keeps those beliefs alive. And once you see it, you'll understand why the most faithful often become the most afraid. Let's break it open. The fear behind the smile. On the surface, most religious believers present their confidence like polished armor. They say they love truth. They say that if science proves something, they will gladly adjust their beliefs. It sounds reasonable. It sounds open-minded. But watch closely when the conversation takes a turn toward evidence that contradicts what they were taught as children. The energy shifts. Their voice tightens. Their posture stiffens. The smile becomes a little too controlled. You can almost feel a quiet panic hidden underneath the politeness. This fear is not about the data itself. It is not about fossils or physics or DNA. It is about what those things represent. Science asks a simple question: what is actually true? Religion asks a very different question: who am I if this story falls apart? And that second question is terrifying. When evidence challenges a belief, it is not just a fact that is threatened. It is a sense of identity, a sense of belonging, a sense of certainty that has been carried for years and protected with rituals, community, and tradition. Imagine building your entire worldview around a sacred narrative. Every holiday, every family memory, every moral decision wrapped around a story that feels bigger than you. Now imagine that a single piece of evidence is enough to make that story wobble. That wobble feels like the ground under your feet shifting. It does not matter if the evidence is clear. Emotion always moves faster than logic. The most faithful are often the ones who feel the most vulnerable when their beliefs are questioned, not because they are uninformed, but because they are invested. This is why the fear behind the smile matters. It reveals something deeper. The threat of science is not the discovery, it is the uncertainty that follows, and uncertainty is the one thing a closed belief system cannot tolerate. Certainty is a drug. Certainty feels like a warm room in a cold world. It gives you the sense that everything fits together, that every event has meaning, that every struggle is part of a larger plan. This is why religious belief is so powerful. It offers closure before the questions have even been asked. It gives you a universe with a narrator, a script, a purpose. You do not have to wonder. You do not have to investigate. You simply have to trust. That comfort becomes emotional fuel, and over time it starts to feel like something you cannot live without. Science does the opposite. It does not hand you a finished story. It hands you a flashlight and tells you to look around for yourself. It says every answer is temporary, and every discovery can be replaced with a better one. To the scientific mind, this is exciting. It means growth. It means progress. But to someone raised on absolute truth, the idea of being wrong is not just uncomfortable. It is destabilizing. It feels like stepping out of that warm room into a dark, open landscape where nothing is guaranteed. Imagine spending years believing you have the final explanation for reality. Then you encounter a method that tells you the final explanation does not exist, that everything is open to revision, that truth is not declared but tested. For someone trained to obey rather than explore, this sounds like chaos. It sounds like a bottomless pit where every old answer dissolves as soon as it is touched. And yet, this is exactly where scientific thinking begins, not with confidence but with humility, not with a conclusion but with a question. Once you truly taste uncertainty, your old beliefs no longer satisfy you. They feel too small, too rigid, too artificially perfect. That moment when your comfortable answers stop working is the real source of fear, because it forces you to confront reality without the emotional safety of certainty. Questions are more dangerous than answers. Science does not march into religion like an enemy with a flag. It does something far quieter and far more revolutionary. It teaches people to ask questions. At first, these questions seem harmless. A child wonders why lightning flashes across the sky. A student wonders how diseases spread. A curious mind wonders how the earth began. None of these questions sound rebellious. They sound innocent. they sound human. But something subtle happens every time a real answer appears. A mystery disappears. And with it, disappears another hiding place for divine explanations. What once required supernatural intervention now unfolds through natural laws, chemistry, weather patterns, evolution, or physics. Bit by bit, the sacred fog thins out. What once felt enchanted becomes understandable, and understanding is the one thing that weakens the power of myth. Religion survives by protecting certain questions from being asked. It frames them as forbidden or disrespectful or unnecessary. Mystery becomes a shield that preserves authority. If no one understands how something works, the person who claims to speak for the divine becomes the guide. But the moment knowledge appears, the guide loses his position. Knowledge erases the need for intermediaries. Knowledge frees people from explanations built on fear. Science threatens this structure without ever intending to. It simply shines light into places that were kept dim. The more light you bring in, the less room there is for the supernatural to hide. Authority that depends on darkness cannot survive brightness. And this is where the true danger emerges. When mystery dies, the hierarchy built on that mystery collapses with it. The fear is not about losing belief. It is about losing control. Once people learn to ask their own questions, they no longer need someone else to answer them. The collapse of control. There is a quiet truth that religious institutions will never admit openly. Knowledge reduces obedience. The more people understand, the less they submit. When individuals learn how the world actually functions, they no longer rely on intermediaries who claim exclusive access to the divine. They no longer need rituals to feel safe or prayers to feel guided. They begin to trust their own reasoning instead of someone else's authority. And that shift is enough to shake the foundations of any belief system that depends on followers staying uncertain. Consider what happens every time a major scientific discovery enters the world. When humans learned how electricity works, storms stopped being messages from the heavens. When medicine advanced, illness stopped being punishment for sin. When evolution entered the conversation, human origins no longer required a sacred script. When astronomy expanded, the universe no longer circled around human importance. None of these breakthroughs harmed society. They improved it. But each one threatened the structure of control that religion had used for centuries. People often assume religious panic comes from fear that the discovery itself is dangerous. The real fear comes from what the discovery represents. It shows that the universe can be understood without divine permission. It shows that natural laws, not sacred stories, shape reality. It shows that a priest is not required to interpret the world. And once a person realizes that, they begin to see the cracks in every system that demanded blind trust. Control depends on mystery. Control depends on followers believing they cannot navigate life alone. But the moment someone understands even a small part of the natural world through evidence and reason, the spell begins to fade. If you can understand the universe without a priest, you no longer need someone to stand between you and truth. That realization is not just empowering, it is liberating. It is also the exact moment when institutional control starts to collapse. The fear of being ordinary. Religious stories often begin with a powerful emotional promise. You are chosen. You are special. You are central to the universe. The divine watches you, guides you, protects you, and assigns you a cosmic purpose. This message creates a warm sense of significance, the feeling that your life is part of a grand design. It is comforting to believe that the universe is not indifferent, that it revolves around your existence, and that everything you do carries eternal meaning. Science removes that comfort. It does not belittle humanity, but it places us within nature instead of above it. It says we are the result of countless accidents, adaptations, collisions, and improbabilities. We are extraordinary only because the universe itself is extraordinary, not because we were placed here with a script. For some people, this perspective is liberating. It means freedom. It means possibility. It means that meaning is something we create, not something we must obey. But for others, this idea is deeply unsettling. If humans are not the center of creation, then morality is not delivered from the sky. It must be constructed through empathy and responsibility. If life does not come with a predetermined purpose, then we must shape our own. And that level of autonomy feels intimidating to anyone who grew up believing that purpose was gifted, not built. Imagine being raised with the belief that your life has cosmic importance, that your actions echo in eternity, Then imagine being told that you are one species among millions, living on one planet among trillions, shaped by forces that never had your name in mind. It feels like being demoted. It feels like being returned to the ordinary world after living in a fantasy of divine attention. For many believers, this shift is not just philosophical, it is personal. The fear is not that science makes humans small. The fear is that without divine purpose, they must face themselves, not as chosen beings, but as humans who must define their own significance. The ego problem. Religion offers something that speaks directly to the human ego. It promises cosmic validation. It assures you that someone is watching your every choice. Someone approves when you obey. Someone rewards you for loyalty and devotion. You become the center of a divine spotlight. Your life matters not only on earth but in eternity. That sense of cosmic attention feels intoxicating, almost like being constantly applauded by an invisible audience. Science removes that audience entirely. It tells you that the universe is not observing you. It is not cheering. It is not judging. It is simply unfolding according to natural laws. And that shift is uncomfortable because it strips away a layer of emotional protection. It forces you to look at your life without the comforting idea that your thoughts and actions are part of a celestial performance. It reveals something people rarely want to admit. Many beliefs are not about God. They are about self-importance. When you believe the universe is watching you, your existence feels significant by default. When that belief disappears, something fragile inside the ego is exposed. You become one human among billions, trying to make sense of life without a script. You are no longer the protagonist of a divine narrative. You are simply a person searching for meaning in a vast cosmos that does not revolve around you. For many believers, that realization is unbearable. It feels like losing status. It feels like losing the emotional comfort of being special. Yet this confrontation with ordinary humanity is also where genuine self-understanding begins. Without divine applause, you discover who you are when no one is grading you. You learn to build meaning through action rather than expectation. And while that can be unsettling, it is also profoundly freeing. The fear of accountability. Religion speaks endlessly about judgment, consequences, and moral reckoning. It paints vivid images of punishment and reward, of sins forgiven and sins condemned. On the surface, it seems like a system built around responsibility. But look closer, and you see something very different. Religion often provides an escape from real accountability. If something painful happens, believers can say it was part of a divine plan. If something fails, they can say it was meant to be. If they make a harmful choice, they can seek forgiveness without repairing the damage. Accountability becomes flexible, almost negotiable. Science offers no such escape. It is blunt. It is unromantic. It tells you that if prayer does not cure cancer, you must face the harsh reality of biology. Cells multiply, genes mutate, treatment requires knowledge, not wishes. When a miracle does not appear, you cannot hand the situation over to supernatural intervention. You must confront cause and effect. You must acknowledge the choices, behaviors, and systems that led to the outcome. There is no divine loophole. There is only reality. This is why science feels threatening to many believers. It removes the comfort of surrendering responsibility to an invisible force. It does not allow you to hide behind phrases like, "it was meant to be," or "God knows what he is doing." Instead, it demands evidence, action, and consequence. It demands that you take ownership of your health, your decisions, your environment, and your future. Responsibility is heavier than sin because it cannot be forgiven with a prayer. It must be confronted. It must be changed through effort rather than absolved through ritual. And for someone raised to rely on divine intervention, this level of accountability is frightening. It exposes the truth that outcomes are shaped by human choices, not cosmic scripts. And that realization forces a kind of maturity that many would rather avoid. The social prison. Many believers are not actually afraid of scientific facts. They are afraid of what accepting those facts might cost them. Imagine spending your entire life inside a community where everyone believes the same story. Your friends, your family, your partner, your traditions, your holidays, your identity, all orbit around a shared faith. Inside that circle, believing is not just normal, it is required. Doubt is tolerated only if it leads back to obedience. Curiosity is welcome only if it strengthens the group. Anything else becomes a threat. So, When someone encounters scientific explanations that contradict sacred teachings, the fear that rises is not purely intellectual, it is social. What happens if you speak the truth you discovered? What happens if you ask questions that make others uncomfortable? What if your curiosity is interpreted as rebellion? Suddenly, you are not just challenging an idea, you are risking your place in the tribe. Losing your beliefs can feel painful, but losing your people can feel devastating. Many former believers describe the same struggle. They did not fear evolution or astronomy or genetics. They feared the possibility of being excluded. They feared disappointing family. They feared being labeled broken, dangerous, or deceived. Religion has a way of turning disagreement into betrayal. And when the tribe sees your honesty as betrayal, the cost of truth becomes enormous. Science can make you rational. Religion can make you exiled. That is the real conflict. When truth threatens community, community pushes back harder than any argument ever could. Even if a person privately recognizes that scientific explanations make more sense, they often stay silent to preserve the relationships that shape their identity. This is why the fear runs so deep. It is not just a fear of being wrong, it is the fear of being alone. The mind can process new information, but the heart fears the loss of belonging. And in many cases, social survival wins over intellectual honesty. The final reason: science doesn't break faith, it breaks the illusion of permission. At the heart of this fear lies a truth that is rarely spoken. Science empowers the individual, while religion protects the institution. Science encourages you to learn, to think, to question, and to discover for yourself. It hands you the tools to explore reality without waiting for someone else to grant you approval. It tells you that knowledge belongs to everyone, not just the chosen few. This is liberating. It is also destabilizing for any system built on authority. Religion teaches a very different pattern. It tells you to trust instead of investigate. It tells you to obey instead of explore. It tells you to accept instead of analyze. It tells you to submit instead of question. These instructions create a psychological structure in which permission must be earned and truth must be delivered from above. When your worldview is built on these rules, independent thinking becomes not just unusual, but almost forbidden. This is where science becomes dangerous to religion, not because it disproves sacred stories, but because it removes the idea that you need permission to seek answers. Once a person realizes they can understand the world through observation, reason, and evidence, they no longer need an authority figure to interpret reality for them. They stop asking what they are allowed to believe and begin discovering what is actually true. That shift breaks the invisible contract between the institution and the individual. Science does not simply challenge doctrines. It challenges the hierarchy that keeps those doctrines in power. It dissolves the dependency that religious systems rely on. It reveals that knowledge is not a sacred gift controlled by an elite group, but a universal human capacity. When you empower the human mind, everything built on unquestioned belief begins to weaken. And that is the real reason religious people fear science. It does not take away their faith. It takes away the illusion that someone else must give them permission to think. In the end, science is not the enemy of faith. It is the enemy of fear. Fear of losing identity, fear of uncertainty, fear of responsibility, fear of seeing the world as it truly is, rather than how we were told it must be. Yet there is something beautiful on the other side of that fear. When it falls away, you are left with something stronger than belief. You are left with understanding, not borrowed truth, not inherited answers, your own mind, awake and alive. That awakening is not an attack on anything, it is an invitation to think deeper, to learn more, to step beyond the limits others placed around your curiosity. If this video made you question even one assumption, let that spark keep going. Keep thinking, keep exploring, keep challenging the stories that shaped you. And if you value truth over tradition, subscribe and stay curious. The world is far bigger than the stories we outgrow.